Hi everyone, so I guess this will be the last video for the night, we'll see. So this is me just going over the basics of persuasion. We talked about this in class during the last week that we were together, but this is just to go over. So persuasion is about convincing the people listening to you, or if you're writing to someone, convincing the person to agree with your perspective on something. Again, an argument is, we use arguing when you're putting logic forth, and persuasion is both using logic and methods of being able to just convince almost by any means. You know, bribing is a persuasion, but here you're persuading with your logic and your words, but also your presence and the quality of your voice and your directness and assertiveness and your passion for the subject. So that's why it's the persuasion speech, because it's more than just the logic of your argument. So again, you're trying to convince the audience to see your point of view on a subject. Good topics for persuasion require, and I'm looking at the handout that I gave to people, and I believe this is posted on the pages. Good persuasion speeches require that people need to be convinced. So remember, whatever you want to talk about, it should be something that requires a bit of a tussle. Things that are obvious that everybody would agree with aren't really good persuasion topics. So to persuade people not to do hardcore drugs is not really a good topic, because most people agree, that's not a good thing to do. So you want to have something that is a bit of a struggle. And in the previous video, I think it was the previous one, where I talked about all the possible topics now in our new world, all of them hopefully have a bit of you're tussling, is this good? Is this not good? Or, I'm sorry, is this right or is that right, and so forth. So keep that in mind. It should be something that requires convincing the person. So having evidence and support and sources is very important. So just because you say something on a subject doesn't necessarily make it so. So if you're talking about things being able to feed people with only organic food, you really need to have numbers to do that. I mean, the big issue with that, people sometimes do that, but the big problem with that topic is in order to produce food for 7 billion people, you need to use the mass farming. There's no way, as far as I understand, that you can produce food for 7 billion people by only farming in an organic way. If you have sources that say otherwise, then that's the point. You have to convince using the sources and the data to make a convincing argument there. So again, this is where the sources and the facts really matters, because you say something doesn't make it so. And I feel like I'm pretty well read on many things, and I can check things and so forth. So it really matters if you're making an assertion that something could happen. If we make a change, or if the person makes a change, it really needs to be backed up. The big issue with sometimes students want to lower the drinking age back to 18 and make the argument that you're an adult at 18. Why can you go off to war if you can't drink beer? But statistics show that having the drinking age at 21 has saved lives. That when they've made the changes, that drunk driving really has gone down. So what do you say to those numbers? And sometimes people do make a point, but again, you have to have the facts to do that. So you want to have evidence, and then be mindful of what people would say who would disagree with you. So to be super clear, when you're making a persuasion speech, you're not talking pros and cons, or, well, on one hand, you're taking a definite position, but you have to be aware of what the opposition would say, and then be able to refute or rebut what the opposition to your position would be. And be mindful as you're making these speeches that people out there commenting may know more about a topic than you. So you really want to try as best as possible. I mean, we all know each other. You don't want to come off as like, well, I'm going to tell you something, and then you get the comments, well, I'll tell you something. I actually worked at a place like this, and I know this. So again, being knowledgeable about stuff is a really important thing. be aware if you're asking people to just change what they think about something, or if you're asking them to change a behavior that they have, or if you're asking for a policy change. If you're asking for something that requires things, the protocol to be different. And if that's the case, how would one go about it? So the example I often use, that I use with the class is, that it's illegal to smoke with a young child in the house. Well, while that sounds good, how could you possibly enforce it? And to my thinking, it's not enforceable. So you could make a speech urging someone, a mother, a caretaker, not to smoke with an infant in the house. But you can't really enforce that that's a law, because there's just no way to enforce those enforce that as a policy of government. So I think I've quickly covered things. Of course, so in any of these videos, in the comments, so people should comment to each one. I saw it, and then of course, if you have questions in the comments and the replies, put the questions down, and I will try to answer the questions. And if the question is too elaborate, I'll make another video. Later tomorrow, probably, I will do my sample persuasion. In the meantime, what I do want to try to find in my mess of papers here are I had my finger at, and I don't now. Oh, the samples of topics that people have done. I know I read this last. So people in the past have done things like, we should be eating insects for the protein. Don't get exotic pets, which could be really relevant now, since there is this possibility that we shouldn't be eating exotic animals because of what happened with the virus and stuff. And then it's an interesting thing. I'm going to switch for a second. So here's if you have a policy change that they should get rid of these open air markets where humans are interacting with these unhealthy, these diseased animals and eating these diseased wild animals. Because of this, what do? These are poor people in these rural communities. This is their culture. And they don't have food, they don't have alternatives. They're so poor. So on one hand, if this is the cause of the virus, and it has been the cause of other viruses in the past that have jumped to humans, and we want to do a change for the global good, what do you do because it's an infringement on individual rights, while their right to do something is an infringement on our rights not to have a virus. But this is the big issue. It's the same issue with gun control. The person says, I have a right to have a gun, but your right to have a gun means that I don't have as much of a right to safety from gun violence, and that's an issue that comes up in many different things: individual rights versus people's rights, versus the rights of the community. Other things people have talked about: embrace your nerdy side. People should laugh more. Learn a foreign language, get rid of zoos. These are all different topics. One of the best speeches that I've heard recently was stop lying to children about Santa Claus. This is a phenomenon we all do. It's really bad if you think about it. Creating this figure who comes down the chimney and stuff, and that we trick them for our own enjoyment, and we give them the sense of magical thinking, which possibly leads to believing in magical thinking in other ways. So that was a very good speech, and that was an interesting topic. Things not to do, I know I mentioned some in the previous one. So don't do political speeches in terms of who to vote for in any way. No speeches about this particular religion is better than that religion. Topics that are anti-inclusive, I talked about that. No topics that endorse a product or service. And no speeches saying why you should get an A for the class. So those are my notes there. Okay, so I've covered a lot, I think, in these 4 videos. I hope that helps. I think we're doing great. Like I said at the very beginning, reading all the tweets, as I'm coming to call them, all the comments, has been really gratifying to me. I'm going to continue doing this work. I feel good about doing this to check in with people. Thank you all, and all right, that's it for now. Bye-bye.